Hello and welcome to Take Me Home, the podcast offering a social democratic alternative for the politically homeless. I'm Hilary Salt.
And I'm Sebastian Moore.
And we are in what we think is now a more permanent Take Me Home towers, aren't we? Recording in a new setup.
Hopefully, yeah.
So
if it works today.
Yeah, let's see how it goes.
Yeah. All recovered from the by-election?
I still feel that I kind of lost a month and I'm still catching up on sleep and all the other things that I should have done during that month. How about you?
Well, yeah, because a lot of people won't see this, but if you're in a political party and an election gets called, like the by-election in Gorton and Denton, you don't really have a choice. Like, you have to stand in it. You're a political party, right? And so when Andrew Gwynn stepped down, there was a part of me that thought, oh my goodness, no. Because now everything that we were doing and we were focused on had to take a back seat, and then we had to suddenly switch gears and focus our attention on Gorton and Denton, which was good fun, actually.
It was.
Yeah. I think it was enjoyable as a campaign. It was very different to what we've done in the past, because I think we knew from the outset we weren't in with a chance of winning the seat.
I think that's fair.
And I, as the candidate, I don't live in Gorton and Denton. Here, where we are now, is Manchester Withington, which is the constituency over. And so we used it as an opportunity to gain some exposure and some publicity, which I feel like we did.
Yeah.
I had a lot of people reaching out who had seen my videos from other parts of the country, which was great. And
if Take Me Home listeners haven't seen the videos, where would they find them?
You can find them on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all of them.
Wow,
yes. Apart from LinkedIn.
Okay.
We could start posting there as well. My username is generally Sebastian Moore SDP.
Okay.
But we can link to them probably in the description.
That would be a good idea. Yeah. So back to the real world.
Yes.
I'm not suggesting by-elections are not the real world, but it felt like it was an interregnum, if you might call it that. And the things that's on our agenda now is the local elections in May. Well, we're both standing, aren't we?
Yeah.
And we have other North West candidates as well. So do check out whether you've got a candidate in your area. And if you've not, maybe you could stand.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
before we get onto the meat of the things we're bringing to Take Me Home today, I did want to just draw quick attention to, I don't know if you saw this sort of blowing up online yesterday. The intention is that they're going to take away the figures on the Bank of England's notes, so our bank notes, and replace them with wildlife. Did you see this?
I did, yes.
What did you make of it?
I mean, they're just doing it because we can't agree on anything, aren't they? That they just want something that isn't controversial in any way. But that feels controversial to me, that they can't think of anything that isn't controversial. So, what's wrong with the Duke of Wellington?
I did find it funny because there was a lot of the opposition parties were getting upset about it and saying, it's outrageous to take Winston Churchill off the note, which, I mean, I agree with. I think we should have, great historical figures on these banknotes. But I did find it really funny because the Lib Dems put out a video, the Conservatives did, and Reform did, and each one of them came up with a different animal that they thought was replacing Winston Churchill.
Oh,
so the
right.
Lib Dems, Ed Davey said, Winston Churchill can't be replaced by a badger. The Conservatives, the person who was doing the video said he's going to be replaced by an otter, and Nigel Farage thought he was being replaced by a beaver. So I found that quite funny. It's going to be one of the three, maybe all three: badger, otter, and a beaver.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, shall we get on with the more meaty stuff?
What we meant to talk about.
Yeah. So what were you going to talk about today?
I wanted to talk about jury trials and the Courts and Tribunals Bill as it's passing through the House of Commons.
Okay. And I thought I would get us started off on the big topic in the world right now, which is
Iran.
Iran, exactly. Iran or Iran?
Well, in Bolton, definitely Iran.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm showing my southernness here. Yeah, so, I mean, if you don't know what's going on, where have you been? Because it's obviously all over the news. We had Battle of Ideas North on Saturday, which is a great event. This conference up in Manchester, which we were involved in organising. And something I found really funny is that when we discussed the sessions, the first one was on sovereignty. And originally we'd just talked about it in relation to the fact that the Brexit referendum vote was 10 years ago. And then the stuff happened with Venezuela. And we added Venezuela. So it was Venezuela and Brexit Britain. Does sovereignty still matter? And then whilst we were in the midst of organising, the stuff happened with Greenland, where Trump was saying that he's going to take Greenland. So we added Greenland, Venezuela, Greenland, and Brexit Britain. And then just at the last minute, with all the Iran stuff kicking off, we added in Iran. And I thought that just shows the state of the world at the moment, the fact that things are so fast changing that we're constantly having to adapt. And a podcast like this, if I'm slow on editing, it will be completely redundant because Trump will have invaded a different country next week.
Don't say that.
Well, yeah. So Iran, essentially on the 28th of February, which was 2 weeks ago, really, there was some coordinated strikes from the US and Israel, which wiped out a few key targets, including the supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
I'm so glad you're going to do all these complicated pronunciations today.
Well, I should be okay. My pronunciation is not great, but I was learning Farsi for a while, so I should be better than I am. But there we go.
You're better than me.
Yeah. So these strikes have been going on since then. Iran has retaliated, and we're now caught in the midst of what could be a drawn-out conflict. Trump has said that they're not finished yet, but that he needs to. They need to sort of wrap it up quickly.
It's mostly complete, I thought he said, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, Trump, every interview, he sort of says something that makes me think he's contradicting himself, but that's sort of in Trump's communication style. Interestingly, Trump has the ability as part of the... there was an act passed in, I think, 73 or something in Congress, which allows him to engage in a conflict like this for, I believe it's 60 days. And then that can be extended after that 60 days for another 30 days. So he has potentially 3 months.
That means without going to any other...
Without going to Congress. Because Congress would then have to pass a motion voting for war with a certain country. So yeah, we're now in a position where oil prices have been affected. Oil briefly went over $100 a barrel. Now, a bit about the geography of Iran, because I think this is relevant. So Iran is different. I think a lot of people in the West sort of confuse Iran with other Middle East states. Iran is not an Arab state. So they have a very, very small Arabic population, but majority of Iranians speak Farsi or Persian.
I was going to say, they like the term Persian, don't they?
What was interesting is when I started learning the language, one of the things I was surprised about was that the teacher would call it Persian. I said, that's interesting. So the state historically was known as Persia until the 1930s, when the first Shah made an attempt to include the different or represent the different ethnic populations of Iran, because only about 50 to 60% are Persian. The rest are minority groups. So the largest minority group is Azeris, and the second largest is Kurds. Mm-hmm. And we know from other conflicts, we talked about Syria quite a lot when that was kicking off, that the Kurdish population are mostly concentrated in that area in sort of north-western Iran, bordering Iraq, and then over to Syria, Turkey. That's where the Kurdish population exists.
We might need to add a little map in at that stage for those people.
Don't say that. It's going to be more editing.
Who are not following this exactly.
So Iran is absolutely massive as a country. Yeah. It's bigger than the UK, Germany and France combined. It's got these massive mountain ranges. So the Zagros Mountains in the west. You've got I think it's the Markan Mountains in the south, sort of southeast, and then the Elburz in the north. So it's bordered by these huge mountain ranges. In the middle of the country, you've got these massive deserts. One of these deserts is bigger than the Netherlands and Belgium.
Wow.
So you get a bit of an idea about the size of this country. And it's incredibly well defended because of its geography. Now, the key to Iran, or understanding the geopolitical ramifications, is the Strait of Hormuz, which has been in the news a lot recently. So about a fifth of the world's oil supplies goes through the Strait of Hormuz, because that is a key route for Kuwait, for Saudi Arabia, and for Iranian oil. Now, when there's a conflict and Iran sort of holds the key to the Strait of Hormuz, because it's only 35 kilometers across, they can just close the strait. So what we're seeing now is oil is not getting through, which of course, when you restrict the demand, suddenly the price of oil is going up. I think people will have noticed the petrol stations, the prices are going up. This has had an interesting, and maybe we can get onto this, but an interesting development in terms of our energy policy in the UK. And I think people would expect people that are perhaps in our camp, where we talk about energy abundance and making the most of our own oil and gas reserves, we might expect this to be a chink in the armour of the sort of the net zero, fundamentalists, if you can call them that, like Ed Miliband. Interestingly, it's sort of made them double down. And fine, they might be looking at us and saying the exact same thing, right? So it's had all of these different ramifications, and Iran is very interesting in that respect because it holds a lot of weight geopolitically. Anyway, thoughts?
Just as an aside, as well as the actual kind of physical control of the Straits of Hormuz, there is the issue around getting insurance cover for any cargo going through it. My understanding is that it's now almost impossible to get insurance cover. And the cost has risen so high that the cost of the insurance is greater than the money that you would make on taking cargo through. Mm-hmm. So therefore, nobody would want to bother. And so I think it's easy to think about the closure and the inability of cargo to transit that area as being all about the war and maybe mines and those kind of physical things, but there are kind of financial issues there as well. Yeah, and I think it's not just oil; it's things like fertilizer that come through there as well. And obviously, just where we are, spring has sprung in the UK, and I'll be planting my tomato seeds this weekend. But for proper farming businesses, threats to our supply of fertilizer will be a big issue as well as oil.
A few tankers have got through, particularly Iranian ones and all of that oil is going to China, which is interesting. What they have to do is they have to go dark, so turn off any sort of tracking software. I don't know how it works, right? So they can't be tracked. And but Iran has said that they will hit any tanker trying to go through. Interestingly, Trump said, I think in the last couple of days, I can't remember his exact words, and I've just lost the article now, but he said something like, you've just got to be brave and go for it. He's saying to these oil tankers, he said, we've taken out their ability to strike you, so just go for it. Yeah. I think you've got to be brave.
I think the American government are also looking to provide alternative insurance cover.
Right, okay.
Which, I think you'll be very brave to do that without insurance cover. Maybe this is just my actuarial background that makes me worry about these things. But that's something that the UK government hasn't thought to provide, interestingly.
So a little bit about the UK then and how it's affected by this. In Iran's retaliatory strikes, they hit RAF Akrotiri, which is on the island of Cyprus, where we still have two bases there. There was a bit of criticism as to why the UK hasn't been defending that. Now, they have sent a ship, the HMS Dragon, I believe, is on its way. And they've said that a process which would normally take 6 weeks of getting that ready, is they've done in 6 days. I think one question could be, why wasn't it ready anyway? Yeah. With something like this, surely they would have known about they would have had intel about these strikes. I can't imagine they wouldn't have done. And I think it's brought to the forefront the shockingly small size of our navy, and how a lot of people don't realise that even though we were once the naval superpower in the world and envied all over the world for our navy, it's now very, very small, and we struggle to even defend places like, our own bases in Cyprus.
Yeah, I've said my piece before, haven't I, that I think we should wind down the army and just really build up our navy.
Right, okay, yeah.
I'm sure wouldn't be popular with our
right.
friends of the forces.
We've just lost all of the army voters. So what do we do then as a response, the UK? So the political response has been interesting. Farage initially came out and said we should support the US strikes. Reform seemed to be a little bit contradictory in what they're saying. Robert Jenrick was saying we should stay out of it. Interestingly, since the last episode we did, which was a while back, we've had the formation of a new political party, Restore Britain. And Rupert Lowe has been quite adamant that we shouldn't be focusing on bombing other countries and we should be focusing on Britain and our problems here. So there's a bit of a split on the right. There's been this question of whether we should, if we're not getting involved, whether we should let the US use our bases. Because we still have a lot of valuable bases in strategic locations, which Trump would very much want to use. Interestingly, he said in a bit of a, I was going to say a bit of a criticism, a complete criticism of Starmer. He said he's no Winston Churchill. And he said if the UK decide to get involved now, we don't need them. There's no point coming in right at the end when the war is already won.
We're not going to have Starmer on our banknotes then.
No, probably not. I wonder what the population would choose, Starmer or a beaver. We could poll the public, couldn't we?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What should the UK do?
I'm very much a non-interventionist in these kind of situations. So not only because the history of Western intervention in any of these disputed areas is just a very, very poor experience. We've never managed to go in and make things better. It's almost, there's almost nothing that can make things worse than Western intervention. So that's kind of where I would start. I think some of the more balanced questions. So, should we allow America to use bases? Should we support other people intervening? I think are kind of a little bit more balanced. And I think I would want to have a really clear understanding of what's in it for us. Why would we benefit from that? And that does seem to be the thing that is missing from a lot of the discussion. How do we decide what's in our best interests? Nobody's asking us, are they? And that seems to be a debate that we've forgotten how to have.
Yeah.
I think so many years being in the EU, I think we kind of just behave like a member state and not a nation state. And we have to rediscover how to think about what is in our best interests.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people look at what's going on in Iran, or what has been going on for a long time, which is an unbelievably oppressive regime that have killed thousands upon thousands of its own citizens. You saw the Mahsa Amini protests. Of course, I think we discussed them on this.
Yeah.
Where she was protesting without her hijab, because it's illegal to not wear a hijab as a woman in Iran, and she was killed by police, and lots of people came out in protest. And then the regime cracked down. This regime goes back to 1979 when they had the Islamic Revolution, and I think a lot of people look at that and say, this awful regime that's been in place since 79, this is a chance to get rid of it. And I think that supposes that it's up to us to get rid of, and that we can just kind of look around the world and go, oh, we don't like that regime there, we're going to get rid of that. And we want this, over here. And I think I might have been liable to that sort of thinking, because I mean, we all want to see liberal democracy all over the world. We believe it's the best system. Doesn't seem like it sometimes, but I think that what the 2000s told us and the 2010s is that is wishful thinking. It's a fantasy. And who are we to decide what's best for these countries? Who are we to say we're just going to replace this regime with another one? And even if we could, and even if we thought that was the best thing to do, you then see in places like Afghanistan, in Iraq, the inability of let's say the conquering power, in this case US and the coalition, the UK, to provide stability and consistency. You know, in many ways the war in Afghanistan was a success initially, but the problem was, what do you do then? And we saw over 20 years an inability to provide or to help foster any sort of democratic process where there was a healthy democracy.
And especially that's the case if you're only intervening from the air, you know, so you haven't got anybody there, kind of boots on the ground, as they say. I think the idea that you can... I mean, I wish the Iranian people every success in overthrowing that vile regime. You know, that's absolutely what I want. But the idea that, you know, the US comes in and through aerial strikes makes it so that happens, I just don't... I think that's rather aspirational, really. I would love them to succeed, but it's hard to see that that's going to happen. And I think the more likely outcome is that there will be a period of real instability in the region, which probably won't help the Iranian people either.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think that it's easy for us to get caught up in the Trump stuff. I mean, when the Maduro thing happened, and I think it's a really interesting... I've been wondering to myself the last couple of days why I had a different response to the Maduro thing. And there's a couple of reasons. I said this to you yesterday or 2 days ago, that I was a little bit less, you know, vehement in my opposition to the kidnapping of Maduro, because that was much clearer that it was in the interests of America, right? So they had a clearer idea of what they were trying to do there. And it seems to me, and I don't know if this is public information or not, but it seems to me that they had correspondence with the deputy in Venezuela, so that there would be a new regime that would be more aligned to American interests. Now, that's not America saying, oh, we just want to go and impose democracy in other countries. That's them saying, well, we've got this regime that's hostile to us, and it will be in our interest to put in a regime that's more favourable, and to do so with minimal casualties and a very, very well-targeted operation. Now, doesn't mean I'm necessarily saying it was the right thing to do. I'm just saying that it's much more defendable. Defendable? Defensible?
Defensible, I think. Yeah.
Now, putting that aside for a second, Iran is a very different prospect, partly because of the makeup and the history of its political process. You know, Venezuela has had elections that are much more democratic in the past, and I think we've seen a suppression of that. But it's a very, very different country, very different setup. You know, it's not a theocracy for a start. Iran, I think people are taking what's happened in Venezuela, which Donald Trump claimed was part of the Monroe Doctrine, or the Donroe Doctrine, which suggests that the US should be able to have influence in the Western Hemisphere. And now he's going into, you know, the other side of the world. And I think a lot of people watching, and it can be tempting to do this, look and say, oh, wow, they've had a bit of success there. They can do it in other countries now. Completely different thing. And it's easy for us to then suddenly get drawn into something, especially if we just do what America tells us to, which at the moment we're not. And I, you know, commend Starmer for that. A lot of people was sort of ready to criticise him, but I think at least, you know, take the positives when you can. And it would be easy for us to get drawn into a long, protracted conflict when we then start having to send in troops as a way of, you know, backing up the efforts that we've made there. And suddenly you're then drawn into something that we saw with Iraq. And I know that it's a different situation, but but I think we have to learn our lessons from the past. And I think that a lot of the public are strongly non-interventionist for good reason, but the political class maybe less so. And I think we need to re-establish that that sense of we're not just going to try and intervene in other countries and impose what we want.
I think as soon as you start going to war, everything becomes really unpredictable. There's so many things that can change around you, and so imagining that even with the kind of weaponry and the AI and everything else that we've got today, the idea that you can really control what's going on in a war situation, I think is just madness. But just to go back to what you said, because it almost sounded like what you said was
Support for
if you can if you can intervene cleanly and quickly, that's okay. But if you can only intervene in a very dirty, horrible way, then that's not okay. I don't think you were saying that, but it sounded like
what I'm saying is that in order to defend a position like what they're doing in Iran or what they did in Venezuela, one of the criterion is what are your goals. And how do you measure when you have achieved those goals?
Yeah.
And in Venezuela, that was a lot more obvious. I know that he was dilly-dallying about whether it was about the drugs issue or whether it was about oil, but it was a lot clearer. Now, I don't know if we've seen the end of the Venezuela stuff, but it does seem like they've achieved what they wanted to achieve. And they weren't going to be drawn into a protracted conflict. Now, I'm not American, and I think what we have a tendency to do is to judge America like we judge the UK. I judge the UK because I'm a citizen that can vote in the elections here, and I care about the UK. So I'm only judging America from like a third-party perspective, as an analysis more than as a voter or a commentator in America, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
If the UK had gone and done that, I might be saying something very different.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So are we agreeing that non-intervention is the right approach for Britain here?
Yeah. Definitely.
Even though we do think that it would be great if that regime in Iran could be overthrown.
Yeah, and non-intervention, not as a default position because you haven't made up your mind, but non-intervention because it's stated and you say this is in the best interest of the UK to not join America in this war and to focus on what we care about.
Yeah. So that's a traditional SDP position, isn't it? Which we think, from an analysis of this situation, we think continues to be right.
Yeah. Jury trials.
Jury trials, right? Okay.
That was quite an in-depth.
Yeah. Moving on.
Moving on. We got to do what I think happens on the campaign trail, where you're asked about something. And you're being asked about the NHS and you're really digging into that, and then suddenly they'll ask you about parks or something and you go, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing now. So Iran, let's park that.
Okay.
Jury trials, what's been going on this
trials. Week? So this is very much a UK focus issue. So in the House of Commons this week, they had the second reading of the Courts and Tribunals Bill, which is the bill that the most obvious headline from it is this is the bill that will remove the right to jury trials. So it had its second reading on Tuesday this week. We're recording on Thursday. It had a second reading on Tuesday this week. The bill did pass that stage of the Commons by over 100 votes, just over 100 votes, which means it now goes to committee stage. So that's where it is. So I thought, we have talked about this before. We talked about it in terms of the Leveson recommendations. That was the report, the independent report that government commissioned before they went down this road. But I thought it was worth just picking up on where we are, reminding people that it's happening, perhaps having a bit of a discussion about why things like jury trials are important. So the things that this bill does, and I should say, one of the websites I've been reading quite closely is that of Justice. They're like a legal charity that defends people's rights, and the analyses they've been producing have been really, really good and really readable.
Can you just call yourself as a charity just a word like justice? It seems like you shouldn't be allowed to do that. Like security. Justice.
That is what they're called. I think they've been called that for a long time.
Prosperity. Okay.
Yeah. So what does it do, this bill? And there's 4 kind of big things that it does. It removes that right to a trial by jury for cases where the potential sentence is less than 3 years, and for cases that are very complex, fraud and complex financial crime is the right to a jury trial has been removed for those. It also there are some cases at the moment where you can decide to have it heard, well, the accused can decide to have it heard in a magistrate's court or a Crown Court, and that ability to go to a Crown Court is being removed. They will all be heard by magistrates' courts. They're removing the right to appeal to a Crown Court for a case that's been heard in the magistrate's court, and they're also increasing, we don't quite know how much, but significantly, the sentencing powers of magistrates. So that's the things that this bill does.
Can you just explain the difference between Crown and magistrates, and what is likely to, if I commit a crime, where am I likely to end up?
So, very serious criminal cases go to Crown Courts and are heard by juries. So rape, for example, is something that will continue to be heard in a Crown Court with the jury. But less serious crimes will be. I think there's kind of intermediate level where it's not a Crown Court, but you still have a jury, and then there's the magistrate's court, which is just a magistrate sitting. And
a magistrate, you said to me earlier, is a volunteer.
Absolutely. So we did a public meeting, didn't we, in Manchester, with a really interesting lecturer in criminal law, Dr. Liz Peatfield, and she was, making the point that magistrates are volunteers, unpaid, and the workload that will be transferred to magistrates by this bill will be really significant. They already have a bit of a backlog, so that's going to get worse for them. Magistrates actually only have 3 weeks initial training, which in and of itself feels wrong if they're going to be hearing more and more serious crimes. So that this whole thing seems to me to be really problematic. So it's been steered through by David Lammy, Justice Secretary, and he's now the Deputy Prime Minister, isn't he, as well?
He is. I never really understood that. He's Deputy Prime Minister, but Lucy Powell has been elected Deputy Leader of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
Seems like those two things aren't intertwined.
Yeah, you'd think they're the same job, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But yeah. Obviously, it's been justified on the basis that there is this very long delay in the court system. So people who are having cases listed now will be being given cases in 2030. And that is really problematic because, witnesses walk away, it's kind of justice delayed is justice denied, isn't it? So I think everybody agrees that those delays are not acceptable. But the idea that this solution will get rid of all those delays is, I think, a bit questionable. So the Institute for Government have done an analysis, and they think that based on the government's own modelling, this will only reduce the delays by about 2.5% at best. So whilst it's been justified on that basis, I think we've got to be quite sceptical about whether that is really the case. So it's worth just asking the question again, why are jury trials important? Do you want to have a go?
Why? Yeah, I was going to say to you, why would I want to be judged by 12 people that have no experience, no knowledge necessarily of the criminal justice system, instead of a lawyer or a judge that has extensive knowledge and has served for decades?
Well, I would say that the reason you want that is because they are your peers. So, you're not the person sitting in judgment on you is not part of a tenured elite, as it were. You're being judged by people who are precisely your peers. And that's important for you if you're the accused. But I actually think it's equally important for those 12 people on the jury, because this is one of the really few times that we, as citizens, are asked to undertake a civic duty. And I do think people take it very, very seriously. I don't know if you know people who've been on a jury.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that certainly the people I know have taken it very seriously and have, they're not allowed to talk about cases outside, but they have shared that they really agonised over it and thought really hard about it. That's one of the things that the other reasons that they're important is that what polling shows is that this is perhaps the most trusted area of the legal and judicial system. So, people on the streets do actually trust this. There's some evidence that actually it's the least discriminatory form of justice as well. So when you draw a jury from a particular community, they're likely to represent that community in a way that maybe a judge doesn't. So, judges are still to this day a certain type of person. And so that there is a real feeling, and I say real evidence, that is the least discriminatory form. That's another reason why I would say juries are really important. It really has the trust of people. And we've said all that without talking about Magna Carta.
How have we got this far
Yeah.
into the episode without bringing up the Magna Carta?
Exactly. So
what date was the Magna Carta?
1215.
Very good. You've looked that up.
I had that in my head. Yeah. This is one of the rights that is enshrined in the Magna Carta. And clearly the world and everything has changed, but I think people do actually still value that kind of ancient right, that we have that ability to be judged by our peers in that kind of a format. A couple of other things that people say are important about jury trials are it is kind of part of the democratic process. So there are situations, aren't there, and there's been some recently, where a jury has found people innocent who are clearly guilty.
I was trying to think of the word for this, and it's completely slipped my mind.
Yes, I can't think of
Something
either.
verdict.
Yes.
It's completely.
Yeah,
It came up at our meeting in 2 weeks ago in Manchester.
It did, absolutely, yeah. The one that sticks in my mind, this is before you were born, Sebastian, would be when there was all the protests on Greenham Common against the US air bases there. They broke into the US airbase and threw paint over one of the aircraft. And they were found innocent by a jury, even though they were absolutely clearly guilty. And so it is part of that democratic control over our system of justice where the public can say, this is not acceptable, and therefore, we will put our foot down, put our democratic foot down. And the other thing is that it does, there's an extent to which it protects judges. So if you're expecting judges to always be the people who say, perhaps in a very very violent case, that that somebody is guilty, then that puts them on the line.
Yeah.
And actually taking the heat off them is good for our justice system too.
Yeah.
So I think all those reasons are rational reasons why we really should defend jury trials.
I remember working in schools in Italy that were named after the judges that were assassinated by the mafia. I want to say Giuseppe Falcone, in the 80s, bombed his car. The mafia put a bomb in his car. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to say is that I'm a big believer in reflecting the irrationality of human beings in our institutions. So human beings are not robots. Mm-hmm. We don't have perfect decision making. It's one of the reasons that I'm not a free marketeer, because I think a lot of free market economics relies on this idea that humans are perfect decision makers that can balance things perfectly and make the right decision every time.
Homo economicus.
Very good, yeah.
The Latin term for that.
Exactly.
I think somebody said people are more like Homer Simpson, actually.
Right, okay, yeah. And if you've got, if you think about the three branches of government, the executive, which proposes laws and proposes things that we should do, the legislative that votes on whether we should adopt those, and then the judicial that sort of what's the word I wanted to use? Not enforces it, but adjudicates on it, I suppose.
Yeah, sits in judgment.
Yeah. If you were an alien, or let's say like a robot designing that, you'd think, well, why would we need juries? You know, these things are very clear. These are the rules. But real life doesn't work out like that, and it's messy and irrational, and it's amazing that I'm sure loads of people will have seen various films, you know, court cases, fictional or true, where there's been a very, very complicated case, and often having 12 people who are new to this world are able to look through a clearer set of eyes and without bias, and it's spread over, because there's 12 of them, you're more likely to get a reasonable judgment. I think there's so many reasons why we need jury trials, and that's from a very ignorant perspective of somebody that doesn't know a great deal about law, but you'll have seen various people in Parliament defend jury trials. I mean, I think you were mentioning before Carl Turner,
yes,
Labour MP for Hull.
Hull.
Geoffrey Cox, who was the previous, well, he was Attorney General at one point. He gave a very well-received speech in the Commons yesterday, I think it was. And he was obviously a lawyer himself. So people with more expertise will defend it as well. We heard at the meeting 2 weeks ago, people like Liz Peatfield, who's a lecturer in criminal justice, they will have even more sort of well-founded reasons why jury trials should be defended.
Yeah. One of the kind of, it feels like a second order thing, but it's really important, is that the way that legal aid works depends on what kind of a court your case is heard in. So if your case is heard in a Crown Court, you get legal aid if you've got earnings of less than, I think it's about 35,000. Whereas in a magistrate's court, you only get legal aid if you've got earnings less than 22,000. And that's kind of an area slap bang in the middle of where, you know, kind of median earnings level. So the number of people who will not get legal aid because of these changes is going to be, you know, really significant. And that again feels to me a real rational reason to oppose these changes.
And another instance where the current government is enacting policies which affect lower earning people.
Which you would think that they're the people that the Labour Party should be really defending.
And which is why I've made the case, and I know, you know, people in the SDP are often making this case, that the system that we're currently living under, this Frankenstein sort of system of government, it stops the Labour Party from being able to represent the interests of the working class, and it stops the Conservative Party from being a true Conservative party. So you end up with this blob, this sort of centrist establishment blob, that will always go for the technocratic answer. They will always go for the thing that looks right on a spreadsheet, and they'll look at something like jury trials and say, wow, there's a backlog of court cases, how can we do this? Oh, we can just get rid of jury trials. You know, it's very similar to, in my mind, to the argument that when they blocked Andy Burnham from standing in Gorton and Denton, they said, oh, but if Andy Burnham stood and won the seat, he would have to step down as mayor of Greater Manchester, and that would cost a certain amount of money they came out with of running that election. And somebody said to us, I think in one of the group chats we're in, somebody that's not in the SDP, but they said, so we can't have democracy now in the UK because it's too expensive. And I think it's the same is true for jury trials.
Yes.
It's like, is this what we've become as a country?
Absolutely, yeah. That's people know the price of everything and
the value of nothing.
The value of nothing. Thank you for completing that little couplet for me. You've already talked a little bit about the opposition to it, and perhaps one thing just to mention is that one of the people who used to oppose getting rid of jury trials was one David Lemmy. Lots of his tweets from like 2019, 2020, where he was arguing really strongly that jury trials were so important. I think at that time there was an argument that they were going to be suspended because of COVID.
Right.
And he was making a really, really strong argument that was completely wrong.
And he was in the opposition at the time.
Yes.
So of course he was arguing against it because the Conservatives, weirdly, and now they're coming out. It's always the same. It's this Punch and Judy politics.
Yeah.
The establishment will do the same policies, and then whoever's in power will enact them. Whoever's not in power, the opposition will, pretend at least to oppose them.
Yeah, yeah. It's just it feels just so wrong as a way of running a country, doesn't it?
And this is why I've tried to make a case a lot that it's not about the individuals. I think we have a tendency to want it to be about the individuals and say Keir Starmer's an awful man and David Lammy's an awful man, and fine, you might think that, but it's funny, whoever gets into these positions seems to do similar things each time.
Yeah.
This is why we need structural change, not just replace the individuals with new individuals.
Yeah. Worth saying that this was, of course, not in the Labour Party's manifesto, any of this.
Yeah.
So.
I had a little look yesterday at Keir Starmer's sort of pledges when he was trying to become leader of the Labour Party, and I agreed with so many of them. Common ownership, nationalisation of he had water, rail, energy, and mail, and there were so many pledges that it sounds like a completely different man, a completely different ideology to what he's now espousing as Prime Minister. I thought that's incredible that he's said a certain thing to get into that position, and when he ends up as Prime Minister and he has the ability, now he's got the power with a huge majority in the House of Commons, and he doesn't do any of the stuff that supposedly he wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, Mail was mentioned in the House of Commons today, this week, of course, because of the problems in service levels and the not meeting the universal service provision targets, the current owners of Royal Mail. So I still think renationalisation of Royal Mail would be a good thing to aim for. Can I finish on perhaps a note of appreciation? So I don't know if people saw Charlotte Nichols. She's the MP for Warrington, Labour again. And she spoke very much in favour of jury trials, and she shared her experience of taking a court case because there was...
she accused somebody, didn't she?
She accused somebody of rape.
Yeah.
As it happens, that conviction was not upheld by a jury. And so you might think that would make her very much anti-jury, but she argued really passionately for the importance of keeping jury trials. But she also made the case that because this rationale is that it will reduce the levels of delay that people experience, that David Lammy was effectively using rape victims as, I think she said, a cudgel to force through this change. And she was making the point very strongly that it was absolutely incorrect to use people who've gone through horrible experiences as, to kind of weaponise their experience in this whole process. So I thought she was very brave and very principled to make those points. So well done, Charlotte Nichols.
So, what have we learnt today? We shouldn't be intervening in foreign wars that have no clear purpose, that don't benefit us as a nation.
Agreed.
We should be worrying about our own problems. We should become energy independent so that these foreign wars don't affect us so much.
Yeah.
And that's done not by sticking up more wind turbines, but making the most of our own oil and gas reserves, paving the way to nuclear energy.
Yeah.
We also need to nationalise the energy industry, as well as mail in this case.
Yes.
And we need to stand by things like key democratic principles like jury trials.
We do.
And that's where most of the public are.
I think it is. I think most people would agree with that list of however many things it was. Yeah, I think most people would tick all those boxes.
Great. So if you are listening to this and think that sounds like a bit of me, then go to the SDP website and join up.
Do, and maybe stand in the forthcoming local elections.
I was about to say, and then you will, there's a special promotion if you join up and quote Take Me Home, but there's not. But
There's not.
We could make one, couldn't we? Let's do that for next time.
Shall we?
Yeah,
Okay.
special promotion. If you join up to the SDP and you quote Take Me Home, we'll send you something.
Well, should we get some Take Me Home mugs?
We definitely
Something
should.
like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, that's another thing to put on my to-do list then.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Thank you,
Hilary. It's been fun to be back.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening. Please do all those things that we always ask you to do. I know people think that this isn't important, but it really is. So I think what we might do over the next few weeks is, for each of the different channels, just explain to people exactly how they do this. But do follow us, do recommend us, do tell your friends about us, and do keep listening.
And the best thing you can do is just share this video with somebody if you thought it was worth listening to.
Yeah, please do. Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye.